He thought he could cut my bonus and get away with it. He forgot who built the system. I didn't raise my voice, I didn't make a scene, I just flipped one switch. And their $4.3 million product launch vanished overnight. You want to hear about petty revenge? Try surgical revenge with a six-figure smile. My name is Claire Rutledge. At 39. I'd spent the last 11 years of my life as the chief engineer developing automated systems at Velmaxis Technologies, a software company nestled in the quiet tech hub of Redmond, Oregon. Not the flashiest name in the industry, but we had carved out a respectable niche in enterprise security solutions. Our clients included several Fortune 500 companies and government contractors who relied on our systems to protect their most sensitive data. I'm not what you'd call a social butterfly. I prefer the elegant logic of code to the messy unpredictability of people. My apartment walls are lined with framed algorithms rather than family photos, and my idea of a perfect Friday night involves a pot of strong coffee and debugging a particularly thorny piece of software. This dedication had earned me respect within the company, at least until recently. The morning everything changed started like any other. I arrived at the office at 7:30 a.m., a full hour before most of my colleagues. I liked the quiet, the ability to settle into my work without interruption. My desk was minimalist dual monitors, a mechanical keyboard that clicked satisfyingly with each keystroke, and a single potted succulent that had somehow survived 3 years under my neglectful care. I was reviewing the final integration tests for VelVault 4.0, our flagship product scheduled to launch the following week. This wasn't just another update, it represented a complete architectural overhaul of our security platform. The anticipated revenue was $4.3 million in the first quarter alone, with projections of $20 million for the year. I had personally designed and implemented the entire back-end infrastructure, a robust, scalable system that could handle 10 times the traffic of our previous version while cutting response time by 80%. It was the kind of engineering achievement that should have cemented my position at Velmaxis for years to come. I allowed myself a small smile as the tests ran successfully, one after another, like a perfectly choreographed dance. The notification sound from my email broke my concentration. I glanced at the sender, Scott Devereux, VP of Product Development and my direct supervisor for the past 3 years. The subject line read, Q4 Performance Bonuses, Update. I clicked it open, expecting the standard congratulatory message that preceded bonus announcements. Scott had been effusive in his praise of my work on VelVault 4.0 during our last review. Groundbreaking, he'd called it, the kind of innovation that puts us years ahead of competitors. Instead, I found 3 terse paragraphs explaining that due to unexpected budget constraints and strategic reallocation of resources, my $10,000 performance bonus would be temporarily delayed. No timeline was provided for when I might expect it. The email concluded with a perfunctory, "Your continued dedication to Velmaxis is appreciated." I stared at the screen, reading and rereading the message. $10,000 wasn't life-changing money, but it represented recognition of the countless late nights and weekends I'd sacrificed over the past year. More importantly, this bonus had been explicitly promised to me when I agreed to take on the VelVault overhaul, a project that had consumed my life for 18 months. I'm not prone to emotional outbursts. My colleagues often joke about my programmer's poker face, but in that moment, I felt something shift inside me, a cold, crystalline clarity replacing the warmth of loyalty I'd felt toward Velmaxis for over a decade. I closed the email without replying and turned back to my monitors. The test suite continued to run flawlessly, each green check mark a testament to the elegance of the system I'd built. A system that was about to generate millions in revenue for the company that had just denied me my promised compensation. The irony wasn't lost on me. Throughout the morning, I observed colleagues receiving their bonus notifications. Their reactions told me everything: smiles, quiet fist pumps, immediate texting to spouses. These weren't people being told their bonuses were delayed, they were getting paid. During lunch, I made my way to the break room, where Velmaxis employees typically gathered around the expensive espresso machine that had been installed the previous year, a morale booster, according to management. As I waited for my coffee, I overheard Marcus from the front-end development team talking excitedly about using his bonus for a down payment on a new Tesla. Marcus had contributed to VelVault 4.0, certainly, but his work had been peripheral at best. The UI improvements were nice, but hardly revolutionary. Yet he was getting his bonus while mine, the architect of the entire backend, was delayed. Good for you, I said, keeping my voice neutral as I collected my coffee. The new Model 3s look great. Thanks, Claire. He beamed, oblivious to the storm brewing behind my calm exterior. Couldn't have done it without the killer backend you built. That API is a dream to work with. I nodded and returned to my desk, where I pulled up the company's internal documentation system. As chief engineer, I had access to most departments' records, not the highest-level executive materials, but enough to start piecing together what might really be happening with the budget. After 30 minutes of searching, I found what I needed: a financial planning document for the current quarter that had been carelessly left with incorrect permission settings. It showed clearly that while my bonus had been delayed, the executive team's compensation packages, including Scott's, had remained untouched. In fact, the document indicated a 15% increase in the bonus pool for director-level and above positions. They weren't delaying my bonus because of budget constraints. They were redirecting it to pad their own pockets. The realization should have made me angry, but instead, it crystallized my thoughts into cold, methodical precision. I closed the document and opened our code repository, navigating to the core systems I had built for VelVault 4.0. Over the years, I'd developed the habit of documenting everything meticulously except for one thing. When building critical systems, I always included what I called emergency doors, backdoor access points, and fail-safe mechanisms that weren't documented in the official specifications. These weren't security vulnerabilities. They were legitimate administration tools that only I knew about, designed to fix catastrophic failures in the unlikely event that primary recovery systems failed. In 11 years, I had never needed to use these emergency protocols. The systems I built didn't fail catastrophically, but they existed, quietly embedded in millions of lines of code, like secret passages in an elaborate castle. As I reviewed the deployment architecture for VelVault 4.0, I confirmed what I already suspected: I was still the only person with root access to both the staging and production environments. The DevOps team had user-level permissions, but the master keys remained in my possession alone, a testament to the trust the company had placed in me over the years. More interesting, however, was what I discovered in our continuous integration, continuous deployment, CI/CD pipeline. 6 months earlier, during the early testing phases, I had written a command sequence to simulate a complete system rollback, essentially a kill switch that would revert all changes and lock down the system. It was intended as a testing tool to ensure our disaster recovery protocols worked correctly. But after the tests were complete, I had never removed it. It sat there, a dormant line of code that could, with a single command, freeze the entire VelVault platform. I closed the repository and leaned back in my chair, thinking. I was not, by nature, a vindictive person. I believed in fairness, in merit-based rewards, in keeping your word. Velmaxis, or more specifically, Scott had violated that trust. I decided to give him one chance to explain. At 4:30 p.m., I walked to Scott's office. His assistant had left for the day, but I could see him through the glass walls, hunched over his laptop. I knocked lightly on the door frame. "Claire," he said, looking up with a practiced smile that didn't reach his eyes. "What can I do for you?" "I wanted to talk about the email you sent this morning," I said, taking a seat across from him without waiting for an invitation. "About my bonus being delayed." Scott's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Ah, yes, unfortunate timing, I know. But these budget adjustments happen sometimes. I'm sure you understand." "I understand that everyone else seems to have received their bonuses," I replied evenly, including Marcus, who worked on the peripheral UI components, while I, who built the entire back-end architecture for a $4.3 million product, am being told to wait indefinitely. Scott's face hardened. "Claire, I don't think it's appropriate to discuss other employees' compensation. I also understand. I continued as if he hadn't spoken. That the executive bonus pool has increased by 15% this quarter. So the money exists. It's just not being allocated to me. That got his attention. His eyes narrowed slightly. Where did you get that information? It's in the Q4 financial planning document, the one with the incorrect permission settings. A flash of something worry crossed his face before he regained his composure. Look, Claire, you're an invaluable member of the team. No one's disputing that. But sometimes, strategic decisions have to be made about resource allocation. It's just business. It's just $10,000, I corrected him. A drop in the bucket compared to what Velvault 4.0 will generate. A bonus that was explicitly promised to me when I agreed to take on this project. Scott leaned back in his chair, studying me. When he spoke again, his voice had a dismissive edge I hadn't heard him use before. Claire, you're great, but no one's irreplaceable. It's just 10 grand. The launch is next week, the system is ready, and frankly, we have other talented engineers who can handle the maintenance phase. I was trying to be diplomatic with the delay language, but if you want the unvarnished truth, the company has decided your bonus allocation would be better used elsewhere. End of story. The coldness in my chest crystallized further. I see. Thank you for the clarity. I stood to leave, but Scott wasn't finished. One more thing, Claire, I value your contributions. I really do. But this conversation has made me concerned about your commitment going forward. Perhaps it would be best if you took some time off after the launch, paid leave, of course, to reassess your priorities. My priorities are quite clear, I said, but I appreciate your concern. I walked out of his office with mechanical precision, my mind already calculating variables and outcomes like the systems I designed. By the time I reached my desk, I had formulated 3 possible courses of action, with branching decision trees for each potential response. I was about to start implementing the first step when another email notification appeared. From Scott, sent to the entire engineering department. Team, with the Velvault 4.0 launch rapidly approaching, we need to ensure system stability and security. Effective immediately after the launch event, we will implement a temporary restriction of high-level access privileges. Claire Rutledge's admin credentials will be suspended during the initial public rollout phase to prevent any accidental system changes. Normal access will be restored once we confirm stable operation. This is standard procedure for major launches. Standard procedure in 11 years. We had never once restricted access privileges during a launch. If anything, we expanded them, ensuring all hands were on deck to address any issues that arose. This wasn't procedure. This was Scott covering his tracks, making sure I couldn't cause problems after being effectively dismissed. He was planning to push me out all along. The bonus was just the beginning. I closed the email and shut down my workstation with deliberate calm. To anyone watching, I appeared to be leaving for the day as usual. Inside, I had made my decision. That night, I didn't go home. Instead, I drove to a 24-hour cafe on the other side of town, one with reliable Wi-Fi and private booths. I ordered a large black coffee and opened my laptop. First, I connected to the Velmaxis VPN using my credentials. No one would question this. It was common for me to work late, especially in the days before a major launch. Then I accessed the staging environment for Velvault 4.0, the exact replica of the production system that would go live the following day. For a moment, I hesitated. What I was about to do crossed a line I had never approached in my professional career. But then I remembered Scott's words. No one's irreplaceable. It's just 10 grand. I began typing, activating the dormant rollback command I had discovered earlier. But I modified it slightly, ensuring it wouldn't just revert the system, it would freeze it in a state of limbo. Neither fully functional nor completely broken, just stuck. Next, I systematically revoked root access for the entire DevOps team, replacing their credentials with a single new user, Legacy Sys Claire. This account had a complex password known only to me, stored nowhere but in my memory. Finally, I implemented a subtle time delay trigger that would activate these changes at precisely 9:00 a.m. the next day, 30 minutes after the launch event was scheduled to begin, when all the important clients, press, and executives would be watching. The entire process took less than an hour. When I finished, I left no trace of my activities in the logs. To anyone reviewing the system later, it would appear that a catastrophic configuration error had occurred, the kind of rare, perfect storm failure that happens perhaps once in a decade of system administration. I closed my laptop, paid for my coffee, and drove home. That night, I slept better than I had in months. The next morning, I arrived at the office at my usual time, 7:30 a.m. The place was already buzzing with activity, unusual for this hour. The launch event was being set up in the main conference room, which had been transformed with professional lighting, a stage area, and rows of chairs for the invited guests. Technical staff scurried about, checking connections and testing the presentation system. I made my way to my desk, nodding politely to colleagues but avoiding conversation. No one seemed to notice anything unusual about my demeanor. Why would they? I had always been the quiet, reliable one. Predictable Claire, who kept the systems running so smoothly that people forgot she existed until something broke. At 8:15 a.m., the executive team emerged from their offices, dressed in matching Velmaxis blue shirts and khakis, a coordinated look for the press photos. Scott spotted me at my desk and frowned slightly, clearly surprised I wasn't helping with the launch preparations. "Claire," he called across the open office, "we need the final system check before guests arrive. Can you handle that?" "Already done," I lied smoothly. "Everything looks perfect. Green across the board." He hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Good. Join us in the conference room in 30 minutes. You should be present for the technical demonstration, just in case." "Of course," I agreed. I wouldn't miss it. At 8:45 a.m., I joined the gathering in the conference room. The space was filled with important clients, technology journalists, and industry analysts. Our CEO, Michael Thornton, was working the room, shaking hands and laughing too loudly at unfunny jokes. The catered breakfast spread remained largely untouched. Everyone was too keyed up for food. I took a seat in the back row, away from the spotlight. Scott was at the front with the other executives, reviewing his presentation notes and occasionally glancing at his watch. The large screen behind him displayed the Velvault 4.0 logo, pulsing gently with blue light. At exactly 9:00 a.m., Michael stepped onto the small stage and welcomed everyone to the future of enterprise security. The audience applauded politely. I checked my phone 9:01 a.m. My modifications to the system would now be active. Michael spoke for about 5 minutes, outlining Velmaxis's journey and the revolutionary nature of Velvault 4.0. Then he introduced Scott, who would lead the technical demonstration. Scott took the stage with confident strides. "Thank you, Michael. And thank you all for joining us on this momentous day. Velvault 4.0 represents not just an upgrade, but a complete reimagining of what enterprise security can be." He turned to the screen and clicked his remote to advance to the live demonstration. Nothing happened. He clicked again, more firmly this time, still nothing. "Just a moment," he said, his smile now visibly strained. "Technical difficulties. You know how it is with live demos." One of the IT support staff hurried forward with a laptop. They conferred in hushed tones, both looking increasingly concerned. Scott's eyes scanned the room and locked onto mine. I maintained a neutral expression, radiating calm concern. "Ladies and gentlemen," Scott announced after a moment, "we seem to be experiencing some connectivity issues. I assure you, this is merely a presentation glitch. The actual Velvault system is running perfectly. If you'll bear with us for just 5 minutes, we'll get this sorted out." But it wasn't just a presentation glitch. As the minutes ticked by, frantic messages began lighting up phones throughout the room. The Velvault staging environment, the one that was supposed to seamlessly transition to production during this event, was completely unresponsive. The sleek demonstration website returned only a stark 503 service unavailable error. The sophisticated real-time threat visualization dashboard showed nothing but a spinning loading icon. After 15 excruciating minutes, Michael stepped back onto the stage, his face a mask of professional concern. "We appear to be experiencing some unexpected technical challenges," he announced. "We're going to take a short break while our excellent engineering team resolves these issues. Please enjoy the refreshments, and we'll resume shortly." The murmuring in the room grew louder. I noticed several clients huddled together, speaking in low, worried tones. A journalist was already typing rapidly on her phone, no doubt live tweeting the disaster unfolding before her eyes. Scott strode directly to where I sat. "What the hell is happening?" he hissed, leaning down so only I could hear. I looked up at him with wide, innocent eyes. "I have no idea. Everything was fine during my checks this morning." "Well, it's not fine now. Fix it." His voice was tight with barely controlled panic. "I'd be happy to try," I said calmly. "But I'll need my full admin access, of course, the access you were planning to revoke after the launch." His eyes narrowed. "How did you—" He stopped himself. "Fine. Whatever. Just fix this before we lose every client in that room." I followed him to a small side office where several members of the DevOps team were already frantically typing at their laptops, trying to diagnose the problem. "Nothing's working," one of them reported. "We can't even access the basic system logs. It's like the entire platform has been locked down." "Let me try," I said, sitting down at an empty workstation. I entered my credentials, knowing full well they would still work. The system accepted them immediately, but displayed the same error messages the others were seeing. "This is strange," I murmured, putting on a show of confused concern. "It's almost like a security lockdown was triggered, but that shouldn't be possible without multiple authorization keys." Scott's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and winced. "It's Michael. I have to take this." He stepped out of the room, leaving me with the increasingly desperate DevOps team. For the next hour, I pretended to work alongside them, suggesting troubleshooting steps I knew would lead nowhere. Occasionally, I would express frustration that matched theirs, muttering about unprecedented system behavior and possible external interference. The launch event had effectively been put on hold. Michael had moved the guests to a different area of the building for an extended networking opportunity while the technical issues were resolved. But it was clear from the thinning crowd that many had already decided to leave. At 11:30 a.m., Scott returned, his face ashen. He beckoned me into the hallway. "This is a complete disaster," he said without preamble. "3 of our biggest potential clients have already left. The press is crucifying us on social media. Michael is—" He trailed off, unable to fully articulate the CEO's rage. "We need this fixed, now, whatever it takes." "I've been trying," I said. "But I'm hitting the same walls as everyone else. It's as if the system has completely locked itself down." Scott ran a hand through his hair, messing up the careful styling he'd done for the cameras. "Could it be some kind of security breach? A hack?" "Unlikely," I said truthfully. "Our external security layers are showing no signs of penetration. This appears to be an internal system failure." He stared at me for a long moment, something like suspicion flickering in his eyes, but desperation won out over doubt. "What do we need to do? There must be some kind of reset procedure, an emergency protocol." "There is," I confirmed, "but it would require root access to execute, and as you know, after your email yesterday, I'm concerned about my access being revoked." The blood drained from Scott's face as understanding dawned. "Claire," he said slowly, "did you do this?" I met his gaze steadily. "Did I do what?" Scott experienced the same system failure as everyone else. Try to help fix it despite knowing my bonus was delayed and my position was in jeopardy. He lowered his voice to a harsh whisper. "If I find out you had anything to do with this, then what?" I interrupted, my voice equally quiet but razor sharp. "You'll fire me." Seems like that was already the plan, but right now, you have a much bigger problem than my employment status. You have a room full of journalists watching your $4.3 million product launch implode in real time. We stared at each other in tense silence, Finally. Scott's phone buzzed again. He checked it and swore under his breath. Michael wants an update in 5 minutes. What am I supposed to tell him? Tell him I might be able to implement an emergency recovery protocol. I suggested, but I'll need certain assurances. What kind of assurances? Scott's eyes narrowed with suspicion and desperation. My $10,000 bonus, paid in full, immediately, plus a retention bonus of $65,000 to compensate for the misunderstanding about my value to the company. That's extortion, he hissed. That's negotiation, I corrected him. And I'll need it in writing. An email will do. Fine, he spat. What else? A second email to the entire executive team, acknowledging that I was critical to project success and instrumental in resolving today's technical difficulties. Scott's jaw clenched so tight I could almost hear his teeth grinding. And that's it. You'll fix everything. I'll do my best, I said with a small shrug. No guarantees, of course. These things can be unpredictable. 5 minutes later, I had 2 emails in my inbox. The first, from accounts payable, confirming an immediate wire transfer of $75,000 to my bank account at the combined bonus and retention incentive. The second, from Scott to the executive team, with effusive praise for my technical expertise and critical role in the VelVault 4.0 project. I returned to the side office where the DevOps team was still frantically trying to regain access to the system. They looked up as I entered, their faces showing equal parts exhaustion and defeat. I think I might have a solution, I announced. But I'll need some privacy to implement it. Proprietary recovery techniques, you understand. They exchanged glances, then reluctantly filed out of the room. Once alone, I sat down at a workstation and logged in using the legacy Claire credentials I'd created the night before. This time, instead of error messages, I was granted full access to the system. With 2 simple command sequences, one to deactivate the lockdown protocol and another to restore normal access privileges, I brought VelVault 4.0 back online. The entire process took less than 3 minutes. I logged out, erasing all traces of the legacy Claire account in the process, and called the team back in. Try it now, I suggested. One of the junior engineers refreshed his browser, and the VelVault dashboard appeared, functioning perfectly. His jaw dropped. How did you? Just an old recovery technique I developed years ago, I said with a modest smile. Nothing special. Word spread quickly. Within minutes, Scott and Michael burst into the room. Is it true? Michael demanded. Is the system back online? See for yourself, I said, gesturing to the monitors showing the fully functional VelVault interface. Michael's relief was palpable. Thank God, some of the guests have already left, but we might still salvage this. What happened? Before I could answer, Scott jumped in. A rare configuration anomaly, something that couldn't have been predicted. He gave me a warning look. But it's been resolved now, I added. And safeguards have been put in place to prevent it from happening again. Michael clapped me on the shoulder. Excellent work, Claire. I knew we could count on you. He turned to Scott. Let's get back to our guests. We can still do an abbreviated demonstration. As they left, Scott hung back for a moment. This isn't over, he murmured, his voice barely audible. It is for me, I replied with a serene smile. Check your email. The launch event resumed at 1:00 p.m., with considerably fewer attendees. The demonstration proceeded without further incident, though the enthusiasm had noticeably diminished. The damage had been done, the headlines would focus on the failure rather than the eventual recovery. I stayed for the remainder of the event, maintaining my professional demeanor. When it was over, I returned to my desk, backed up my personal files, and cleared out the few personal items I kept there. No one questioned this. Cleaning up after a crisis was normal behavior. Before leaving, I sent a brief email to HR, copying Scott and Michael. After careful consideration, I'm tendering my resignation, effective immediately. The completion of the VelVault 4.0 project marks a natural transition point, and I have decided to pursue other opportunities. I'm grateful for my 11 years at Velmaxis and wish the company continued success. I didn't wait for a response. I walked out of the building for the last time, the weight of 11 years lifting from my shoulders with each step. 1 week later, I read in an industry newsletter that Scott Devereaux had been reassigned to strategic initiatives, corporate speak, for being demoted and sidelined. Velmaxis had announced a rescheduled official launch of VelVault 4.0, but sources reported that their largest potential client had signed with a competitor in the interim. By then, I'd already moved to Santa Cruz, rented a small house overlooking the ocean, and established my own DevOps consulting firm. My first client, one of the companies that had witnessed the VelVault 4.0 launch disaster firsthand, they were particularly interested in my expertise on system resilience and recovery protocols. My consulting rate was 3 times my former salary at Velmaxis. As it turned out, being irreplaceable had its advantages after all. Sometimes in the evening, as I sit on my deck watching the sunset over the Pacific, I think about Scott's words that day in his office. No one's irreplaceable, it's just 10 grand. He thought saving $10,000 made him clever. Costing the company $4.3 million made me legendary. In the end, it wasn't about the money, it was about respect for the work, for the commitment, for the person behind the code. Scott forgot that systems are built by people, and people remember how they're treated. I don't regret what I did. In the vast, complex system of corporate politics and power dynamics, I simply introduced a necessary correction, an elegant solution to an ethical bug in the code. Every system needs balance. Sometimes you have to freeze things over to restore it.